Welcome to the Gold Newsletter Podcast, your bank of knowledge of investment, economics, and geopolitics. Go to goldnewsletter.com for our publications and archives.
This is the Gold Newsletter Podcast. Fergus Hodgson, your host, and I should mention that this is the last episode with this microphone. Soon it'll be replaced. I've got new headphones, so I'm trying to be more modern. But today we have a lady who is blazing her own trail. She is a neuroscientist focused on human sexuality. She has a PhD from York University in Canada. She's a columnist for Canada's top or national newspaper, the Globe and Mail. And she has a new book out, The End of Gender. Debra, I've been wanting to meet you and learn from you for a long time, so welcome.
I know. Thank you so much for having me. And congratulations on the new mic.
Oh, no. So the new mic is in the mail. This one is famous because it's so big. But so Debra, you came to my attention years ago, and you were at that time a columnist for Playboy. And it's rare that a columnist really strikes a chord that says something different, is a bit distinct. I read so much, and that's why, it was something, a different perspective. And I just thought, this is such a thoughtful lady. Now, your book is The End of Gender, and I've been listening to the audio version, which is read by Debra. So you can have the author's voice. Now, there's a lot of technical material in it, to be frank, a lot about what gender means. And I don't understand a lot of this. It's a new world. But the bit that I thought was most interesting was your autobiographical element. The way that you were completing your PhD and you were a teaching assistant and you decided to be a public intellectual outside of the university domain. Now, why was that?
Well, I, at the time, thought that I would stay in academia forever. Well, not forever, but until the end of my career. I thought I would be an academic scientist. I would go on to have my own research lab and continue doing research on sex and gender. And then toward the end of my PhD, I noticed that the climate in academia was shifting. There were definitely topics that people were avoiding, even legitimate experts in the field. They could not talk about these issues, or they were really reluctant to. One area in particular pertained to gender transitioning in young children. And so at the time, all of the mainstream news coverage said that the best way forward for any child who has gender dysphoria, so if they say they're born in the wrong body, the best way forward for them would be to transition to the opposite sex. All the coverage was saying that these kids were much happier after. The parents were saying that they had blossomed. But from a research perspective, all of the research actually shows that it's better for these kids to wait until they reach puberty to transition, if they do, because the vast majority of them are going to outgrow their feelings of gender dysphoria. They're more likely to grow up to be gay in adulthood and not be transgender. So I wrote an op-ed at the time speaking to the research literature, and I waited about 6 months to publish it because I knew that there was going to be public backlash. And I asked a number of my mentors and colleagues for their advice, and they were very supportive of me, but they told me essentially, what's going to happen. And I remember one conversation in particular with one of my mentors who told me essentially that tenure was not going to protect me, because my goal at the time was to wait until I had tenure and then I would speak out about it. And I'm really glad that he gave me that advice, because I made the decision pretty much right away that...
Just slow down. For people who don't understand tenure, what is it and why would tenure not protect a future Debra Soh professor or instructor?
Well, the idea with tenure is historically it would protect academics so that they would be free to pursue whatever research was important and not have to worry about what they would find if there would be some sort of, again, backlash, or if what they found was seen as unacceptable for whatever reason, they would still be protected by the community, by the university. It's completely changed now. I mean, one, it's really, really difficult for professors to get tenure. And even if you do, it does not protect you, because activism really has taken over the academy. I would say this has really been in the last couple of years, maybe 5 years, the last 2 years even, has gotten really bad. before activism, there was a lot of clashing between activists and academics and academic scientists. But now it's to the point where activism is actually coming from within the academy as well. So there really is no protection for even legitimate scientists who have any sort of university affiliation. So the climate
So what you're saying is that even if you nominally have tenure or your job protection, the mob would make your life so unbearable, it wouldn't be worth it.
Exactly. There's a huge price to pay. And I mean, even your academic institution will distance themselves from you. In many cases, people will lose their jobs. It's just the price to pay for being honest about what science says is not worth it for a lot of people. And so now what you see is for any line of research that is potentially controversial, a good scientist will either avoid it altogether because a good scientist doesn't know what they're going to find until they do the study. So if there's a chance that you find something that is controversial or that activists don't like and you're going to pay the price for it, scientists will just say, I'm not going to touch it. So what you do see now instead is the scientists who are willing to do that kind of research, they know in advance what they're going to find. They know that what they're going to find is going to please the public. And so they obviously don't have anything to worry about then because they don't run the risk of being attacked after and being smeared and having their reputations ruined.
I see. And so you chose to be an independent author, researcher. How has that proved for you? Has that just been a tough road? Or, I mean, you said your book is selling well, but is that enough? I mean, can you make a living this way in a field like yours?
You can. You definitely have to work really hard. I mean, I'm pretty much working. My life is pretty much 95% work, to be honest. But that's life. I mean, I've always been ambitious, so I don't mind that. Definitely, I would say in the beginning, it was very, I don't know if tumultuous is probably not the right word. It was uncertain for me. And I write about in the book about this process, my thought process, and wondering what was going to happen. It was even at the very end, my acknowledgements in the book, I dedicate the book really to my readers because without them, I would not be here. I would not have gotten this book deal. Because when I started, I really had no idea if it was going to work out. I moved into journalism from academia. So after that op-ed got published, I was mobbed quite severely on social media. I write about this in The End of Gender. And from there, I got that column with Playboy. And from there, I've continued on. So, if you work really hard and you're focused, I definitely think you can make it happen. I've had a lot of people ask me for advice in terms of how to, orient their lives in a way where they do have the ability to speak out about these issues and how to navigate the fallout from that. And I always say it's definitely worth it. If you are really committed to having that kind of living that way and being able to speak what you really think, you will find a way to overcome whatever obstacles are placed in front of you.
The Gold Newsletter podcast is proudly sponsored by the Discovery Group of Exploration and Development Companies. To learn more about our exceptional track record and exciting future, visit discoverygroup.ca.
Hello listeners, this is Daniel Duarte again, and I am here for this week's segment with the Discovery Group, the proud sponsor of the Gold Newsletter podcast. And today I'm back with a well-known guest, Claudia Tornquist. She is president and CEO of Kodiak Copper, which owns copper porphyry projects in Canada and the US. The company is listed on the TSX Venture Exchange with the ticker symbol KDK. Claudia, welcome back.
Hello, Daniel. It's great to be back. Thanks for having me.
Yes, we're glad to have you back because we have some news to share with our audience regarding one of your projects up in Canada. And I'm talking about the news release you put out recently on October 22. And let me just quote you here a second. This is one of the most impressive copper-gold intercepts reported from a porphyry project in southern BC. And now I'll ask you to back up that very strong statement.
Yeah, I'm happy to do so. We are very pleased with this result. It's 535 meters of 0.76% copper equivalent. That's a fantastic drill result for a porphyry. It's a long intercept and high grade. Just keep in mind that the mine next door is mining material of 0.24% copper. And so, the grades are high and it's a long intercept. So we're very pleased. And we released another hole on the side, the hole number 2, which was a lower grade hole, but also over a long intercept, 640 meters. And we're also pleased with that hole because obviously in a porphyry, you always have lower grade zones, a large envelope, typically of lower grade mineralization, with then some higher grade zones within that. And with what we see now between the holes where we have results already is some size emerging. We can see a mineralized envelope over 300 meters width already and down to 800 meters. And keep in mind, that's only the start. We only have 3 holes and there's obviously lots more to come.
However, for some reason, the market reception has been mixed. So can you explain what is going on and what can you tell to investors?
Well, I think there are a couple of reasons why the market didn't like and didn't appreciate the results so much. It's obviously disappointing to see, but I think part of the reason was that our initial result that we came out with in September was very, very high grade, 2.75% copper equivalent in one shorter interval. So people look at the current grades and look at what we've had in this very high grade intercept and they just see, oh, it's lower. And so are disappointed, even though the grades we had in our hole 4 this time round are still exceptional porphyry grades. So that's one reason. I think people might have also expected more results from more holes. And we were actually hoping to also be able to disclose our hole number 5, but labs are slow at the moment or backed up and we're still waiting for those results. So we just don't have them yet. And the good news is they will be coming sometime soon, but that may be part of the market disappointment. And then what I just sort of touched on already, the lower grade hole number 2, people might have looked at the grades and thought that's disappointing. But as I said, you need a large volume of low grade mineralization, lower grade mineralization as well in a porphyry mine. And so, the results we had from our hole number 2, we liked, and it's an important hole and it shows us size, and combined with the much higher grades that we see in other holes, it's certainly a good result. So we are very pleased with the results and our work is going ahead. We're well financed. Lots more drilling to come. We're financed for up to 30,000 meters and lots more results to come over the next weeks and months.
I see. Well, we are going to keep following the news about MPD and this very exciting project. Claudia, it's always a pleasure to talk with you. And folks, if you want to find out more about Kodiak Copper, you can visit the website. It's 𝘀𝗂𝗃𝗁𝗀𝗄𝗏corp.com and check out the stock, which is listed on the TSX Venture Exchange. See you next week.
That's inspiring because there are these blind spots that even I dare not talk about publicly, at least at this time. And I find that so chilling to our understanding of the world. And often it's an elephant in the room where a lot of people agree with you, but it goes unsaid. Now, you said that, academia has turned into more of an activism center, and particularly related to gender. Why do you think that is?
I think part of it is because there has been such a horrible history between activists and academics around the science of gender in particular, and especially around transgender ideology. So in the book, the first 3 chapters are me laying the foundation in terms of a lot of the research and what these different terms mean. And then from there, we go into more of the political issues and social issues that we're faced with in the following chapters. So I think part of it is because sex researchers have seen what happens when you do speak out against whatever the dominant narrative is around gender, and they don't want to deal with it. So they've stayed quiet. They're also very busy with their research because it is very competitive to be an academic scientist. And so what happens is activists, and even activists within the academy and these other disciplines that are not scientific, I don't want to insult their line of work. I do talk in the book about the difference between.
Say what you want here, Debra. Open.
I know, but just to be as civil as I can, I'll just say that their research is not scientific. It's not based in any supported evidence, anything like that. And it's also, I would just say, genuine science is very difficult and time consuming to do. So as a result, they've completely taken over this conversation. So there is so much misinformation that goes out to the public. I really wrote this book for the average layperson to be able to pick up and read and understand these issues from a scientific perspective. I offer all the citations in the book so that you can look it up and learn more yourself, and even show those studies to people who may disagree with you. And, I really feel that's the only way forward. We have to be, as you said, most people agree. I think the majority of people are very skeptical about a lot of this nonsense. And in the End of Gender, I talk about 9 different myths, and these myths are so prevalent now, but I think most people sense that they don't make sense. It's just they're being lied to, and they're being told that the quote unquote newest science supports things like biological sex and gender are spectrums, that they are social constructs, that what else is there, that gender neutral parenting works, that there are no biological differences essentially between women and men in terms of sex and dating, childhood transitioning is a good idea, all of these ideas.
Yeah. One, you led into my next question, really, because I was thinking, does this maybe confusion, or is this war in the academic sphere filtering down to the people? And I was thinking, I don't really think it is. Maybe somewhat, but what is the impact of this? I mean, so how much of it is filtering down, right, to the broader public, or is it just the media? I'm not sure. Basically, how much of it is filtering down? And then, if it's such a small minority, why do they have this power to push other people around?
I initially thought that this was also, these ideas were very fringe. It was only, those particular disciplines in academia. This was never going to reach the average person who's minding their own business. But it does affect everyone. I get all kinds of people reaching out to me from all walks of life. It doesn't matter what vocation they have, what their hobbies are. They send me things that HR is giving them. They're sending me their kids' curriculum from school. And it's completely nonsensical, a lot of what they're being told. Even with university professors in terms of their training, well, I guess this goes back to the academy, but people have to do these mandatory trainings about gender identity, and they have to pass, they have to agree to some of the myths that I talk about in the book. And it's complete, like, I don't understand why that has what that has to do with anyone's job, number one. And two, the fact that it's factually inaccurate is also very worrisome. So in terms of why I think the vocal minority has gotten so much momentum is because they are so loud and because they intimidate everyone else, and they give the perception that there is some sort of consensus about these ideas. But they also make it very clear that if you don't agree, because they have so much time and energy devoted to attacking anyone who disagrees with them, whereas everyone else has a real job and they're going on about their business. So understandably, I wouldn't say that my life is typical. My life is devoted to fighting these issues and the culture war. But the average person who has a family, they have a mortgage, they have to put gas in their car. They don't have time to deal with this stuff.
That's right. And I'm in this too. I mean, I'm studying, but really I'm just like you, Debra, I'm a full-time writer, columnist, editor. And so we're engaged with these ideas all the time. So we're not good samples to consider in terms of our perspectives on the matter. And before I started recording, you said to me how this is just infiltrating everywhere. And you briefly touched upon there what it's doing to business. And what is the end of the road for this, right? So let's say right now there is affirmative action in hiring. There are these, I guess, educational classes being given in big companies. Is this the worst it's going to get? No. What's next? What's next in line here? Yeah.
I'm really concerned about how children are being targeted, because children don't know any better. They believe what their teachers tell them naturally. It's
scary. They do, yeah.
For the most part, they do, unless they have parents at home that actively tell them to be skeptical. And so you have these children who are being raised into this ideology who will go on to, I think you even see that now with people who are coming into the workforce, younger people who are coming to the workforce, and they have really been indoctrinated in university with these ideas. And it's not so much, I think, the ideas, it's that they're not taught how to think. They're just taught this is the way to think. This is the right way to think. And if you don't agree with it, then you're a bad person. And so I think that's also part of where we are, because instead of engaging, usually what you would do if you disagree with someone is have a debate with them. But instead now it's just about, that's a bad person. You have to either shun them from society, or you have to shut them down and make sure that they do not have a platform to voice their so-called hateful ideas. So with the children, what I see happening is they're going to grow up and they're going to be extremely confused ultimately, because when they're being taught something like I have a lot of parents sending me things from their kids' school saying that people apparently choose their gender, that biological sex doesn't exist, boys and girls don't exist, gender identity, sexual orientation, anatomy, they have nothing to do with one another. And I think we can advocate for trans rights. We can advocate for intersex people's rights. We can advocate for people who are different and to fight discrimination, but we don't have to essentially lie about what the truth is.
Yeah. What are the implications for personal relationships? This is one thing that has been on my mind for years, the way that if we are confused about sex and gender, these two different things. When I was growing up, they were just one. But so now, yeah. But what? And this is, I suspect you do consulting work or direct work on this as well. What are the implications for personal relationships, right, or intimate relationships, romantic relationships?
Right. So chapter 7 of the book is dedicated to this very issue. And if your audience is curious to listen to an excerpt of it, you can actually if you go to my website, which is drdebrasoh.com/book, I have an excerpt from the audiobook. Simon & Schuster posted it, and you can listen to the first 5 minutes of that chapter where I talk about essentially how denying differences between men and women, if you're straight, has a really negative effect on your dating and sex life, because men and women have different sexual systems. I talk about this from an evolutionary perspective. And I think evolutionary psychology has gotten a bad reputation in recent years. People consider it to be sexist or outdated. I don't think it's either of those things. I think we can advocate for gender equality while also acknowledging that there are on average differences between men and women that stem from this history. And it doesn't have to be seen as something that is belittling of women or toxic of men, because to deny those differences is going to do both men and women a disservice.
Right. And what is next in terms of your work now? Because are you following, now that you have all these Patreon supporters, as far as I understand, are they pushing you to write your next book in a certain direction or to do research in a certain way? What are you proceeding with now?
I have a couple new things in the work that I'm not quite ready to announce publicly yet. But if your viewers or listeners follow me on social media, I'm at Dr. Debra Soh on Twitter and at Dr. Debra W. Soh on Instagram. I post all of my updates there. I'm very fortunate in that my audience doesn't really tell me what to say or do, because I think they understand. I mean, I'm critical of, I would consider myself to be a liberal still. I'm critical of the left. I'm critical of the right. I'm about presenting the scientific data as accurately and objectively as I can, regardless of who it upsets. So I think even if people in my audience disagree with me, they respect that I'm being honest in terms of what I have to say.
Right. And going back to my original theme for this show, this is such a time of disruption. Not that I don't support these lockdowns, as you might guess, but what is going to be the future of higher education? Are we really going to see a disruption in such a way that more people flock to the Debra Soh path of going your own way in terms of being a public intellectual and just teaching people directly? And is this actually happening, or is it just something that I've been hoping would happen for a long time?
I think a lot of people are going to abandon the idea of doing a formal education that way, enrolling in universities. I'm I mean, I still think there's a benefit there. I think the academy has to really change a lot, and I see it getting worse before it gets better. But as it stands right now, I think anyone who is a free thinker, anyone who has integrity, is not going to want to stay in an environment like that, unfortunately. And I would advocate for scientists who are still doing academic work to speak up and know that people will support you. You won't be left to your own devices. It might seem like that, but I mean, I'm always amazed whenever I speak out about something contentious, the number of people who will reach out and support me, like yourself, Fergus. So, it ends up balancing out. I would say, and I always tell people, your first mobbing on social media is always the worst. And once you get through the first one, the rest of them are a breeze.
Do you have professional mobbers or I don't know if you call them stalkers? I've dealt with a lot of social media in my life, and you have these people who are literally professionals who basically will latch onto someone like you and try and use that attention towards themselves.
Yeah, you do have that, but I try to see it as a compliment, because I think these people are dedicating, I'm just going about my life. I have a job, I have various other things I do in the very little free time that I have. But,
sure.
They are dedicating their good chunk of time to harassing you, following what you do, to try and take you down. And I think that's the most valuable resource you have, is your time and your energy. And if they want to dedicate it towards hating me, then okay, what can I do about that?
Right. Okay. Well, let's leave it there. There's always a lot more to say, and this is an ongoing topic, which is fascinating. I know it's a little bit of a departure from our normal topics at Gold Newsletter, but I just thought Debra is such a fascinating intellectual. I wanted to have her on. So her website is drdebrasoh.com. She's active on Twitter and I think Instagram too. I'm just the Twitter man. So where else would you like people to follow you? So you said Instagram, I think?
Instagram as well, yeah.
Okay. And the book is The End of Gender, and I've been listening to the audio version. Check it out. We'll link to that in the show notes. It's just goldnewsletter.com/podcast. Debra, it's a privilege to know you and have you on the show.
Thanks so much for having me.